He was born a wealthy Russian count, inherited thousands of acres and hundreds of serfs, and wrote two of the most celebrated novels in human history. Yet, at the absolute height of his world fame, he walked away from his wealth, renounced his titles, and adopted the simple clothes of a peasant. Count Leo Tolstoy was not a literary giant, he was a warrior, a moral revolutionary, and a seeker whose ideas on non-violent resistance would one day inspire Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy was born on August 28, 1828, at his family's grand estate of Yasnaya Polyana. He was born into the highest tiers of imperial Russian nobility, but tragedy struck early. By the age of 9, both his parents had died, leaving young Leo and his siblings to be raised by relatives. As a university student studying in Kazan, studying Oriental languages and law, Tolstoy was far from a saint. He abandoned his studies without a degree, returned to his estate, and fell into a life of gambling, heavy drinking, and aristocratic excess. He frequently racked up massive debts at one point, gambling away the actual house he was born in at Yasnaya Polyana to cover his losses. Seeking direction and an escape from his chaos, he followed his older brother Nikolai to the Caucasus in 1851 to join the Imperial Russian Army. Serving as an artillery officer, he took part in brutal frontier warfare against the Caucasian tribesmen and was later posted to the front lines during the siege of Sevastopol in the Crimean War. At Sevastopol, amidst the deafening cannon fire and horror of the trenches, Tolstoy witnessed raw human suffering on a massive scale, yet he also observed the immense courage of ordinary soldiers. His vivid, unvarnished dispatches from the front line, published as Sevastopol sketches, were read by Tsar Nicholas I and turned Tolstoy into an overnight literary sensation in the capital of St. Petersburg. Tolstoy left the military, sickened by the hypocrisy of war. He traveled through Western Europe, visiting schools, factories, and cities in Paris. He witnessed a public execution by guillotine, an event that horrified him so deeply that he swore he would never serve any government or state authority ever again. After returning to Yasnaya Polyana, he opened a school for the children of his peasant serfs, pioneering a radical, open-ended education system where attendance was voluntary and punishment was banned. In 1862, at the age of 34, Tolstoy married an 18-year-old Sofia Behers, settling down at Yasnaya Polyana. The couple embarked on a remarkable productive chapter. Sofia served as his manager, his copyist, and his editor, handwriting clean drafts of his massive manuscripts multiple times over, often deciphering his nearly unreadable handwriting by a candlelight. It was during these peaceful domestic years that Tolstoy composed his most famous work, War and Peace, a staggering epic depicting Napoleon's 1812 invasion of Russia through the lives of 5 aristocratic families. He spent 6 years researching, interviewing veterans, and drafting the novel. He followed it with Anna Karenina, a tragic exploration of love, social hypocrisy, and human vulnerability. By his late 50s, Tolstoy was celebrated worldwide as the undisputed giant of literary realism. Despite his fame, fortune, and a loving family of 13 children, Tolstoy fell into a catastrophic existential crisis in the 1870s. Looking at his vast achievements, he was consumed by an agonizing question. What meaning is there in life that death does not destroy? He hid ropes and guns from himself to prevent committing suicide. He searched for answers in modern science, philosophy, and the Russian Orthodox Church, but found no relief until he observed the simple Russian peasants. He noticed that despite their extreme poverty and grueling labor, They possessed a quiet peace and purpose rooted in simple, unadorned faith. Tolstoy underwent a radical spiritual transformation. He reread the Gospels. He stripped away church dogma, miracles, and state sanctioned religion, focusing entirely on the core teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. He advocated for total nonviolence, absolute honesty, vegetarianism, and the abolition of private property. He began dressing in peasant smocks, adopted a strict vegan diet, gave up drinking and smoking, and insisted on farming the fields and making his own boots, basically a cobbler. He attempted to give away all his wealth and place all his literary copyrights in the public domain. This caused severe, painful conflicts at home, even with his wife Sophia, who fought fiercely to protect the copyrights and estate to ensure their children would not be left destitute. Yasnaya Polyana became a tense battleground between Tolstoy's devoted followers known as Tolstoyans and his family. In 1894, the book The Kingdom of God is Within You introduced his philosophy of radical nonviolent resistance to state authority. The book was of course banned in Russia, but copies were smuggled across borders. In South Africa, a young lawyer named Mohandas Gandhi read it, sparking a correspondence between the two men that deeply shaped Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha, or passive resistance. By 1910, the emotional strain at home had reached a breaking point. On a freezing November night, the 82-year-old Tolstoy quietly packed his bags and fled his estate in secret, accompanied only by a personal doctor and his daughter Alexandria, seeking quiet refuge to live out his final days. During the cold, dark train journey, his health collapsed, suffering from a high fever and pneumonia. He was taken off the train at the remote railway station of Astapovo. The station master offered Tolstoy his humble cottage, but within hours, international journalists, film crews, and doctors descended on the tiny village, camping outside the small houses as updates were telegraphed around the world. On November 20th, 1910, Leo Tolstoy had passed away. He was buried in the woods at Yasnaya Polyana in a simple mound of earth, without a tombstone or a cross, the exact spot where as a child his brother Nikolai had told him a green stick was buried containing the secret to universal human happiness. Leo Tolstoy began his life as a wealthy nobleman surrounded by luxury, but it ended as a universal voice for human conscience through his art and his struggle. Tolstoy proved that the true greatness lies not in conquering empires, but in mastering oneself. Because the battle at the end of the day is not with you and the world or you and the world's memory of you, but the battle is you versus you. And Tolstoy explored his death and the meaning of what it would mean to pass away from the memories of your family, your loved ones, and what it would mean to be physically gone. In his book, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which I believe is one of, if not his last book he wrote before he died, in which he explored how a man who worked a government job wasted his life away doing work for a corporate entity that he did not believe in, doing work that did not excite him, and living a life that was quote-unquote stable, but not what he wanted. Which is why Tolstoy explored this desperation in human nature. He explored it through his work, War and Peace. He explored it through his work in Anna Karenina, and most importantly, he explored it through his work on novel The Death of Ivan Ilyich, in which you can see Ilyich's desperation to make a useful living, to be someone right before his death. But death is at the door, and it's knocking. And even if you don't open the door, it's going to break it down. And it's going to come for you. And you can see which is desperation to keep on going, to keep finding a meaning, to see the way through, to see a path outside of it all. But through that quiet desperation, he finds nothing and dies, which is what Tolstoy was trying to fight against. To not be desperate, but to live a life of quiet peace and adoration for God Himself.